Congratulations on finishing the book. Now that you're finished with part 3, we're ready to do a few final activities or talk about a few final questions before you move on to both a project and a test over the book. Now, before you start complaining that you're going to have a project and a test, you guys have worked so hard on this book that I think that you're going to do an excellent job on both, so don't worry about it. As you read part 3, you were asked to stop on page 66 to answer the before you move on questions 1 and 2. And at the end of the book on page 83, you were asked to answer the before you move on question number 1. So go ahead and turn in your Metamorphosis book to page 66. Let's look at those 2 questions. Let's look at number 1, plot. No one wants mother to see her son as an insect. What does father do to solve the problem? If you look back to page 61, on that page, father says there's only one solution. So here's a good indication that we're going to find out what father does to solve the problem. If you turn the page to 62, right after father says there's only one solution, the very first thing on the next page shows us that father hired a cleaning lady. So father's solution to the mother not wanting to see her son as an insect was to hire a cleaning lady so that the mother would not have to go into Gregor's room to clean it, and then she wouldn't have to see him. Okay, so we've answered the first question. We've said father decides to solve the problem of mother not wanting to see her son as an insect by hiring a cleaning lady so that no one has to go into Gregor's room. Now let's look at question number 2. Inference. Read pages 64 to 66. Why has Gregor started to look so sick? So let's go ahead and turn to page 64. Pages 64 and 65 are really quite disgusting, to tell you the truth. Let's look at this to see if we can discover why Gregor has started to look so sick. Well, the first thing that it tells us on this page is that Gregor barely ate. Of course, if someone barely eats, they're going to start to look sick. But the rest of this page really gets quite disgusting. Let's look at it. When he happened to pass his food, he would occasionally take a bite, but only for entertainment. Okay, let's think about this, ladies. When he happened to pass his food, what are they talking about when they say pass his food? Again, disgusting, but they're talking about him going to the bathroom. He would occasionally take a bite. That is seriously disgusting. Okay, if you go to the bathroom and then take a bite, obviously you're going to start to look sick. If we move on to the next page, it says he would hold it in his mouth for hours. Again, hold it. Think about what he had just taken a bite of. And then spit it out again. All right, so the question told us to read pages 64, 65, and 66 to answer that question. But really, I think that there was a lot of information here at the top of the page. All right, he barely ate. He would eat his own poop, hold it in his mouth for hours, and then spit it out. That's enough information to tell us why he's starting to look sick. Okay, now that we've talked about both of the before you move on questions on page 66, go ahead and turn to the last page of the book. Let's look at one more question. All right. Number 1, conclusions. When Gregor dies, his family seems sad and relieved at the same time. Why? So, unfortunately, at the end of our story, Gregor died. And while his family was a little bit sad about it, they seemed relieved or kind of glad that he finally died. Why is that? Let's look at page 81. The father says, "Come now. Let's put all this worrying behind us." Okay, what had they been worrying about that they no longer have to be worried about now? As they're walking down the stairs out of their home, the father has his arm around his wife and his daughter, saying, "Shall we?" Okay, here we see that they're leaving to go somewhere. If we look at the next 2 pages, it says, "Then we'll move to a better situated apartment." So now that Gregor has died, they're going to move somewhere. I get the idea that they're moving somewhere that's going to be cheaper for them to live. Okay, so they're looking for an opportunity to have a better life now. If we look at the bottom of the page, it says, "Almost simultaneously, or at the same time, it dawned on Mr. and Mrs. Samsa that in spite of all the recent sorrows, Greta had blossomed into a beautiful, voluptuous girl." And it was like a confirmation of their new dreams and good intentions when at the journey's end, Greta was the first to rise and stretched her young body. On these 2 pages, we can see that even though they're sad about Gregor becoming an insect and dying, their daughter has become a woman, and they're very excited about their future, and they're excited about her future. So to answer that final question that we're talking about, we could say that Gregor's family seems to be both sad and relieved at the same time, because even though it's sad that their son died, they still have a daughter with a future that they're looking forward to. And they're also relieved because they no longer have the stress of living with this son who was this scary giant bug. All right, so let's look at the last 2 pages that you have to work on in your student journal. You should be in your student journal on page 9. We just have pages 9 and 10 to go. We're almost there. So let's start by looking at question number 1. It says personal response. After Gregor's death, the family seems sad and happy at the same time. Have you ever had conflicting feelings about a close family member? Explain. So just like the questions we looked at in part 2, I like to start my questions by restating the statement at the beginning. So I would start my response by saying, after Gregor's death, the family seemed sad and happy at the same time. All right, so the question says, have you ever had conflicting feelings about a close family member? So have you ever had a time when a family member makes you feel opposite feelings? Okay, so like Gregor's family was happy and sad. Happy and sad are opposites. It's kind of hard to feel happy and sad at the same time. So have you ever felt, sometimes with our family we think about it as a love-hate relationship. So have you ever felt with someone in your family like, oh, I love them so much, but right now I hate them? So think about a time when you've had something like that happen, and then be sure to explain yourself. There are different ways to restate this question, but here's a choice for you. You could start your response to that question by saying, I had conflicting feelings toward someone in my family when. All right, so make sure you tell us who that someone in your family is and when you had conflicting feelings. Okay, happy, sad, love, hate, excited but disappointed. So when was there a time when you felt feelings that were opposite towards someone in your family? And be sure to explain the situation. Go ahead and pause the video until you're ready to move on to question number 2. Number 2, cause and effect. How does the arrival of the cleaning woman affect Gregor? Use the word alienate in your response. So we just talked about this. When Gregor's father did not want Gregor's mother to see Gregor as an insect anymore, his solution was to hire a cleaning lady. How did Gregor's father hiring that cleaning lady affect him? And really, to give you a clue, they tell us to use the word alienate in our response. So we know that one of the effects is that it's going to alienate him. And if you remember when we talked about the word alienate at the beginning of the book, alienate means to make someone feel lonely. All right, so here's a start to your response. The arrival of the cleaning woman causes Gregor to feel even more alienated. I would like for you to finish this question by saying how or why hiring the cleaning woman makes Gregor feel even more alienated. How does his father hiring the cleaning woman make him feel even more lonely? All right, go ahead and pause the video until you're ready to move on to number 3. All right, let's look at number 3, inference. What changes in Gregor when he hears his sister refer to him as it and say that they should get rid of him? On page 71 is where you will see his sister start to call him it. So go back to Metamorphosis. Page 71 is where his sister calls him it. So read 70, 71, and 72. When Gregor's sister calls him it, instead of calling him by his name or calling him brother, and when she says to the family that they should get rid of him, what in Gregor changes, or how does Gregor change? I want you all to go back to pages 70, 71, and 72 and try to come up with a response to this for yourself. But here's a sentence starter for you. When Gregor's sister calls him it, instead of calling him by his name and suggests getting rid of him, Gregor starts to. So what starts to happen to Gregor when he hears his sister call him it and say that they should get rid of him? Take your time to answer question number 3. And when you're ready for question number 4, hit play again. Number 4, what if? Connect. Look at your notes on Student Journal page 2. Think about what might happen if you changed your life because of other people's opinions. Compare this to the Metamorphosis. What happens to Gregor because of his family's opinion of him? All right, this question's asking a lot, but it's asking you to look back in your student journal to page 2. This is the questions that we talked about before beginning the story about Joe, whose stepfather told him he was stupid, and Joe started to do bad in school. So go back and look at what you said on that page. What might happen if you changed your life because of other people's opinions? So that's thinking about what happened to Joe. Compare this to the Metamorphosis. So compare Joe to the Metamorphosis. Joe started to fail at school because his stepfather didn't believe in him. What happened to Gregor because of his family's opinion of him? Joe failed in school because his stepfather did not believe in him. This is similar to the Metamorphosis because when Gregor's family did what? Gregor. So in order to answer this question, you need to explain what was Gregor's family's opinion of him. And because of that opinion, what did Gregor do or what happened to Gregor? Take your time to answer question number 4. And when you're ready to move on to page 10, the final page of your student journal, hit play again. Page 10. Number 5, opinion. In part 3, Gregor's condition worsens. List what happens to Gregor in the sequence chart. So Gregor's condition worsens. Throughout part 3, Gregor's sickness or what's going on with Gregor starts to get worse and worse and worse and worse until finally he dies. Okay, so this is a sequence chart. What are the events that leads to Gregor dying at the end of part 3? At the beginning of part 3, Gregor's family stops taking care of him. Part 3 and the story ends with Gregor dying. You need to come up with 3 things or 3 events that happen in between his family stopping taking care of him and him dying. What are 3 things that happen after his family stops taking care of him that lead to him eventually dying? Go back to the story to add those 3 events to your sequence chart, and then we'll move on to the last question at the bottom of the page. All right, final question. Do you think the family is responsible for Gregor's death? Explain. I'm going to leave this question totally up to you to answer. It's just one question. Make sure that you restate the question. Either yes, I think the family is responsible for Gregor's death, or no, I do not think the family is responsible for Gregor's death. Whether you think the family is or is not responsible for Gregor dying, be sure to explain your answer. I'm really looking to see that you can write more than one sentence here. There's got to be more than one reason to support your answer. Gregor and the relationship that he had with his family was a big theme throughout the whole book. So maybe you can pull evidence from different parts of the book, like the beginning and the end, to support your answer. Congratulations on finishing the book and your student journal. Now that you're finished with all parts, come see me and I'll make sure that you have what you need to get started on a project.